Hello and welcome to Phillies Talk Podcast. It's the long-running podcast talking about your Philadelphia Phillies. My name is Rich Baxter, and wow, it's been a long time since the last podcast. I know I said that the last time I did a show, but nearly more than a month has gone by since I did the last podcast, and lo and behold, there's only 10 more games left in the season as of the time I'm doing this show. So the Phillies are wrapping up the 2016 season very rapidly here. And believe it or not, 7 of the last 10 games will be against the New York Mets. And it just so happens that the Mets are in a big run for the wild card 2016. Right now they're in the lead along with San Francisco, tied up in a 3-way tie with the St. Louis Cardinals for the top wild card spot. So there's only going to be 2 wild card positions available, and we'll see if the Phillies have something to say about that when it comes to the Mets getting that wild card. They're the ones that are standing in front of the Mets. The Mets have to get through them and effectively really shut them down for these 7 games left in the season. So it's going to be a very interesting series against the Phillies and the Mets. It's going to be very much watched by Met fans, of course, who are basically following every game, hoping to see that the Mets continue to win. That's what these teams have to do that are chasing the wild card. They have to win every night, basically. They can't lose any ground. If they lose, of course, they have to pray that the other teams that are in the wild card hunt are also losing, so they don't lose any ground. But the Phillies, a different story. They're 69-83 as of the time I'm doing this podcast, so a little improvement from last year. More wins, of course. I don't think they could have went with less wins this year. If they did, there really would be a problem since we started this quote-unquote rebuild that we've been hearing about for so many years now. It seems like there's a little light possibly at the end of the tunnel. A lot of people are looking at the September call-ups that the Phillies have added. And, you know, it's generally a time of season for the Phillies to get a little more hopeful. And that's generally what I guess management would like the fans to be, is more hopeful that their team will be getting better next year. So a lot of the talk has also circled around 2017 with spring training. Some of the September call-ups will be invited to that, no doubt. And it should be more of a kind of a battle for some positions possibly next year as the Phillies look to bolster up their offense, I guess is a nice way of putting it. The Phillies have the least amount of runs scored in all of baseball. They're 30th at the bottom of every major league team scoring runs this year. They're 29th in batting average at .239. They're 29th on base percentage. They're at .299. And they're also 29th at slugging percentage, just a .385. So if you look at those numbers, you've had to think that the Phillies are one of the worst offenses in Major League Baseball, and that those numbers prove it. I'd love to see them somewhere in the middle of the pack because, you know, as we started to talk about at the front of the show here, they're 69-83, yet they've got one of the worst offenses in baseball. So if they just made an improvement with that offense, you could kind of see where those win totals would pick up dramatically. They could possibly get 15 more wins, maybe 16 more wins out of this team. It's amazing that they are at 69-83 to me with that kind of offense. Of course, the Atlanta Braves are not doing well at all this year. They're 61-91 are the Braves. But curiously enough, they just swept the Mets in a 3-game series, the Atlanta Braves. So they're trying to play a spoiler's role as well. towards the end of the season here, and they're on a 5-game winning streak. So even some of the bad teams eventually turn it around and start playing better baseball. We've seen that from the Braves, and we've also seen it from the Phillies probably in the last 10 days. Although they have been winning a game, losing a game here and there, they've been more winning of late than not. The Phillies had 2 wins against the Marlins in the series, the recent series against them. Of course, they swept the White Sox last night with Chris Sale getting pummeled by the Phillies offense. Phils beat them 8-3 on the short 2-game series at Citizens Bank Park. And then now this series shifts up to New York to Citi Field. And I'll tell you, the Mets desperately need a win tonight. And they got some more bad news. Steven Matz has been scratched. He's got the injury bug after a 20-pitch bullpen session today. So a lot of injuries for the New York Mets. Really, I don't see how they can make it too far into the playoffs with all the injuries that they've had. But believe it or not, later in this show, we're going to be talking with Gary Mack from Mets Musings. He's a great podcaster and good friend of mine. We also do another show called the Baseball Talk Radio Show. If you want to tune into that, just go over to baseballtalkradio.com and you can find more than 30 talk shows all about baseball. And there's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week baseball radio player on that page that you can listen to from anywhere in the world, even on your smartphone, tablet, overseas. If you happen to be listening to this show from Europe or somewhere in the Japan area, you can still tune in at any time of the day or night. Of course, daytime over here is nighttime in another side of the world. So regardless of where you are, why don't you tune in to baseballtalkradio.com. It's a great site there, a lot of great shows. And as I said, a little later on during this show, we're going to talk with Gary Mack. He's going to be talking with me about the Phillies, and I'll be talking to him about the Mets with this interesting 7-game out of the last 10 games remaining, going to face off with the Phillies and the Mets. Sounds like a fun time to me. The Phillies taking up residence there in New York for 4 games, and then the Mets will finish out the season in Philadelphia with 3 games. So 7 out of 10 games between these two rivals. And I think it's a great way to end the season for both teams, regardless of what happens. Well, as I said, the Mets have their injury problems, and we'll hear a lot more right from the source a little bit later in the program. But the Phillies have been doing fairly well. The infield has a new record. 3 infielders for the Phillies now have 20 home runs or more. That just happened the other night. Tommy Joseph smacked his 20th home run of the season. He had a nice home run against Chris Sale last night against the Chicago White Sox. But you kind of hope for more offense from the outfielders of the Phillies. We've had sort of a ragtag outfield, I guess you'd have to say, for most of the season. There's been not a lot of, what would you say, power out there. Aaron Altair got injured earlier in the season. He's been back for a few weeks, but he's not back to his old self. When he left this team, he looked like he was going to be an offensive powerhouse. In the last 10 days or so, he hasn't really lived up to that. So it'll be interesting to see if he can regain that next year in spring training. Darren Ruff up with the club. And, of course, Tyler Godell, who the Phillies have really stuck by. And, you know, a good friend of mine made some comments that he looks like a good baseball player, does Tyler Godell. But, you know, looking like a ball player and actually playing like a great ball player are two different things. And I want to be a fan of Goodell, but his numbers are just appalling. So far, he's at a 192 batting average for the Phils, only 4 home runs and 16 RBIs on the whole season with the Phillies here. So Phillies investing a lot of time in Tyler Goodell. Not so sure that that's the way to go. Of course, he's been scouted, and a lot of good things been said about him, but the numbers just aren't adding up. Of course, he's only 23. Phillies taking a big chance with him. He's been in 92 games for the Phillies. He's got 3 doubles, 3 triples, and 4 home runs. So right now he's not really impressing me at all. He's really cost the Phillies a whole lot this year. So I hope they make an improvement there. Phillies just can't continue to carry outfielders like this that don't produce. They're rally killers. They're not driving in runs, obviously. He's not hitting home runs. He's not hitting much at all. If you go over to right field, which also Tyler Goodell has been able to switch fields. He's played some right field and some left field. We're looking at Peter Bourjos, and he's about the same kind of a player to me. He's a little older. He's 29 years of age. He's got a 252 average on the season, which isn't terrible, but he's been in a lot of games for the Phillies this year, brought in by the general manager who he used to play for and over in the Angels. And, again, he's got 5 home runs and 23 RBIs, and the season's almost over. So Peter Bourjos, I don't know if you bring him back next year. He certainly didn't earn a spot to be an everyday player or even every other day type of player. He's been in 120 games for the Phillies so far this year. 20 doubles, 7 triples, 5 home runs, and 23 RBIs. And that's where he's been lacking the RBIs. You figure in 120 games and 353 at-bats, he should have a lot more RBI total than that, at least 50 or more. So I am not very big on Peter Bourjos either. I wouldn't bring either of those 2 players back. Maybe try to trade Goodell for somebody and see if some other team can develop him, get something for him at this point. But I don't think he's going to have a long future with the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, we'll be back in just a moment, right after these commercial messages, and we'll wrap this portion up of Phillies Talk, and then we'll join Mr. Gary Mack talking Mets Phillies on his program on Mets Musings. So be right back, everyone.
Hi, I'm Gary Mack from Mets Musings, and you're listening to the one and only Rich Baxter on Phillies Talk, right here on BaseballPodcast.net, the home of baseball podcasts.
Hi, this is Gary Matthews. You're listening to Fighting Phillies Talk Podcast.
Brewtown Sports is your source for Brewers news and notes. Join Mr. Brewtown as he keeps you up to date on all the happenings of your Milwaukee Brewers and Major League Baseball. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, Brewtown Sports. Listen 24/7 at BrewtownSports.podomatic.com.
Hi, this is Gary Mack from Mets Musings, and you're listening to BaseballPodcast.net. You can hear my show and all the other baseball podcasts at BaseballPodcast.net, the home of great baseball talk shows.
All right, we're back live here on Phillies Talk, talking all about the Philadelphia Phillies on the Phillies Talk Podcast, one of the longest-running podcasts talking all about the Philadelphia Phillies. And, of course, I want to mention my old friend who recently passed away a few months ago now, Jim Mulry. Of course, he used to be my co-host, my longtime co-host. Did 10 years of shows together with Jimmy, and I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm still thinking about him, and I hope you are too if you're a longtime listener. And just know that Jimmy's looking down on us, and all of the remaining shows that I do on Phillies Talk are dedicated to Jimmy's memory. So, Jimmy, again, this one's for you. Well, an interesting time to be a Phillies fan at the end of the season here, 2016. As we were talking about in some previous shows, it'll be the final hurrah for one of the best Phillies of the last few years, of course, Ryan Howard, in his last few remaining games in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform. And the plan was to try to play him as much as possible in the last homestand with the Chicago White Sox, but Ryan Howard came up with a little bit of swelling in the knee area, and he could not play during that series with the White Sox. So a lot of the fans that went out to see him, hoped to see him for the last time, got disappointed. But hopefully they will be able to see him for the final 3 games at home against the New York Mets soon after the series ends at Citi Field. So I know a lot of people will try to be there for the final 3 games against the Mets, just to see Ryan Howard. He's got a long legacy with the team. Of course, a lot of people had said that he was overpaid when he signed the contract that he did. But I don't blame him for signing that contract, of course. You got to get what you can get, and if somebody's going to offer you $127 million to play 6 years of baseball, then you certainly don't turn them down, of course. Howard's been part of the success of the Phillies, probably one of the best times ever in the Phillies' career and the Phillies' legacy when they were successful. Of course, they won the World Series in 2008, and Howard was a big part of that. And he continued to be a big part of this team even after that. Of course, that's what Ruben Amaro thought when he signed him to the big extension. And nowadays, of course, as time goes on, that kind of money is pretty commonplace in the league. Everybody else has caught up to those numbers, so to speak. And they're astronomical numbers, don't get me wrong. $18, $25 million a year to play baseball is kind of ridiculous, but that's what the market is bearing for a lot of these players that are signing these multi-year deals now. So, not that surprising to hear those numbers coming out on the paydays. So it'll be interesting to see how the Phillies wrap up the 2016 season. I hope they get a few more wins. I hope that the Phillies at least split the series with the Mets. Somebody's going to come out the winner with 7 games remaining. I hope the Phils at least win 3 of them. That would be a success for me. Anything more would be, whipped cream on top of the ice cream sundae, so to speak. So we'll have to see if they can do that and close this season out. They're on the verge of having 70 wins on the year. They need only 1 more victory to do that. So they've improved a lot from last year, even though the offense has not improved, if that makes sense to anyone out there. The pitching has really carried the Phillies a long way this year. A lot of pitchers doing quite well for the team. I think the team is very happy with Jeremy Hellickson. They're keeping him on the team. They could have dealt him away. They put him out on waivers. He did get claimed, but Phillies pulled him back in. I think you'll be seeing him next year in a Phillies uniform, and maybe even 2 more seasons for Hellickson. He's still fairly young. He can be a good guide for some of the younger pitchers that the Phillies are still developing, bringing up. We saw Eichhoff finish off against the White Sox last night. He's 11-14. 11 wins is pretty good. You look at the losses, 14, that's not so good. So maybe he can turn that around next year with a better offense. The Phillies in the offseason this year, I think you'll see them go out and get a better hitter for this team. They need a couple of good hitters for this team. I think they need to abandon that Rule 5 draft winner type of player pickup. I think they need to go out and spend a little bit of money now. They're way under budget as far as their payroll. They haven't really spent all that much money compared with the last several seasons. So the Phillies war chest is ready to go. It's filled with money. They should make a splash in the offseason, and I think they might get some interest in a good player to come to the Phillies. We'll have to see. I'd love to see a nice producer of offense join this team. That's what they've sorely needed this year. They just couldn't get firing on all cylinders when you've got a lot of guys in the low 200 batting average. They're not driving the runs in, and that's what wins ball games a lot of times. It's just that one extra hit. You're driving two guys home. Those 2 runs, if your bullpen can hold the lead, there's your extra 10, 12, 15 wins a year for a baseball team. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. During the off season, of course, Phillies Talk Podcast goes all off season, so we hope everyone tunes in at various times. Subscribe to us on iTunes here, Phillies Talk Podcast. We're going to have some authors on, some interesting guests in the off season, as I've had over the last few years. So I hope you continue to tune in to Phillies Talk. And in just a moment, we're going to talk with Gary Mack on his great program, Mets Musings. He's talking to me about the Phillies, and I'll be talking to him about the Mets. So thank you for listening to this edition, everyone, and we'll talk to you again on the next edition, probably shortly after the Phillies season ends, and we get some more direction on where they may be going for 2017. And here's Mr. Gary Mack from Mets Musings.
And we're back, and I'm joined this evening with my good friend and co-host on the Baseball Talk radio show. He's got his own great show called Fighting Phillies is the blog, and Phillies Talk is the podcast. Mr. Rich Baxter. Rich, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for inviting me onto the show, Gary.
Long time no see, Rich. A couple of days. All right, Rich. We're down to 10 games. You believe it, my friend? 10 games left in the season. 7 of those are going to be between the Mets and the Phillies. Mets are still fighting for this wild card that nobody seems to want to win. Mets get swept by the Braves, and then they look up, and they're still in a tie for the wild card. Tell us about the Phillies. Is this will they fold up the tents, or is this their chance to play the spoiler role?
Well, I think they're going to try to play the spoiler role and not necessarily to spoil the Mets' chances, but they're wanting to end this season in a positive note. And if that means beating the Mets or whoever they're playing, then I think that's what they're going for. They had a great victory last night against the Chicago White Sox. They beat up on AL possible Cy Young candidate Chris Sale, the guy that chopped up all the collars off of his own jerseys a few months ago. One of the weirdest stories I've ever heard from a baseball player, especially a professional baseball player.
He didn't like those jerseys, Rich.
He took a scissors or a knife to everybody's jerseys, so they couldn't wear them a couple months ago. But, yeah, the Phillies ended up beating him 8-3 last night. 2 decisive victories over the White Sox. They're trying to end the season on a positive note. Not saying they're going to run the table on the Mets. I'd be happy if they won 3 out of the 7 games, to be honest with you. But, like the Braves tried to do with the Mets, they tried to win. They played the game the way they're supposed to play the game to win, even though they're in last place, and just happened to win a ball game. So that's the way baseball is. It's a funny game.
It certainly is, and we were talking at lunch today, and we decided that if the Mets can go 7-3, they should be in the wild card in some position. So, but that would mean at least, you break it down. They got 3 against the Marlins, so they'd have to at least win 2 out of the 3 there. But that means they'd have to take 5 out of the 7 with the Phillies, and that could be a tall order because the Phillies have been playing better at the second half. They had a very better first half, I should say. Second half, they kind of struggled, but now they came back again, playing a little bit better. Got some good young players on that team, and like you say, they want to build towards next year as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, they had a few September call-ups that you'll probably be seeing tonight, actually, on the field for the Phils. A few names that maybe you're not familiar with. Roman Quinn being one of them. Equal duty out there in left and right field. He could switch fields. He can play center. So the Phillies are high on him. He's one of the top minor league players for the Phillies. He's got a lot of speed. He's brought some spunk to this offense in September. The Phillies sorely needed that. They have probably arguably the worst offense in baseball, near the bottom of every category from runs to batting average, on-base percentage. You name it, the Phillies are near the bottom. It's amazing that they have 69 wins, really, with that sort of an offense. It's just it's mind-bending to think if they could just improve that offense, how much better they could be.
And, Rich, how many games did they win last year?
I believe they just eclipsed not losing 100 games. So I believe they had 99 losses on the year last year.
So they've already improved over last year's record.
Yes, they've improved 6 or 7 games so far over last year's record. And you had to expect that from this team. That it's just not going to be a team that's going to end up in that sort of a position every year. But, they didn't really go out and get any big names this year either. So they were 62 and 100 the Pythagorean theory. They had it down for losing 100 games, but they just escaped out of that. Luckily, winning only 63 games last year. So I guess if you can look at it like that, it's a success for this year. But that offense didn't get improved.
Well, but it is a young team, and let's face it, they needed to really clean house and let these young guys play. And I personally, I don't think the results were as disastrous as everybody thought they were going to be. They were picked to lose 100-plus games or so again this year, last place, and they've actually played, some decent ball during the season. They've actually come up with some decent pitchers. There's a couple of them that you've seen. And again, as you say, the offense is a problem, but boy, everybody I talk to, it seems everybody's team, the offense is a big problem.
Yeah, and that's what wins you ball games a lot of times. Late in the game or in the middle of the game, you have bases loaded. I can't tell you how many times the Phillies have had the bases loaded this year. Went away empty-handed. You just can't keep doing that game after game. Have your opportunities, but you're not seeing them through. Some of the players on the Phillies, Tyler Goodell, for instance, he's been in the outfield for the Phillies a lot this year. He was a Rule 5 pickup. The Phillies are high on him, similar to Obadell Herrera, who also was a Rule 5 pickup. But he just has not carried the weight out there in the outfield. He's batting 192 on the season. He just suffered a concussion in the last game, so we may not see too much more of him for the rest of the season. But, que sera, sera. He hasn't really carried his weight out there in the outfield. So the Phillies, if they're looking anywhere, I think they're going to be looking for a good outfielder, possibly a left fielder in the offseason that can hit.
Well, it's not going to be that good of a free agents class, so they'll probably have to make a deal, but they do have some young talent, so perhaps that they can do that. And what's the situation with Ryan Howard going into the offseason now?
Well, New Yorkers will be seeing the last of Ryan Howard in a Phillies uniform. His contract will not be extended. The Phillies have an option on 2017 or a buyout of, I believe, $10 million for Howard, and I believe they're going to exercise that buyout. They've been trying to shop him. He'll probably play the last 3 games if his knee holds up at home. For the hometown fans, it's been announced that they will try to play him the final 3 games to let fans come and see him for the final time. He's a big piece of the success of the Phillies with the World Series, and shortly afterwards on fire for the Phillies, playing like he was going to go straight into the Hall of Fame for a while, and then came a few injuries. So the legacy of Ryan Howard as a Philly, you're seeing the final days of it.
I think that Achilles really was the downfall for him, and I mean, he is a big guy, so anything like that. But that was really, I think, the thing that really hurt him the most, tearing that Achilles.
Yeah, and he's been a quiet giant on the Phillies, so to speak. And he's been a player that, he's been maligned in the press. He's been maligned by some fans, and he hasn't cried about it. He hasn't taken the low road, so to speak, on anyone. He's been benched this year several times. The Phillies have wanted to play a younger guy named Tommy Joseph, who hit a home run, some RBIs last night against Chris Sale. But he's been the consummate professional here in Philadelphia, never crying about it where he felt bad, but showing his game face every night, ready to play, and you got to respect a player like that.
And Rich, there's no crying in baseball. Remember that? Tom Hanks taught us that. All right, well, so we'll be paying attention to see if he plays at all in this series here in New York, plays one more time. May start a game. It's a big 4-game series, so he may get a start here, or probably see him as a pinch hitter. And I don't want to ruin your evening, but Curtis Granderson hit a 2-run homer, and it's 2-0 Mets now. But that doesn't mean anything because it was 3-0 last night, and they blew that in the 8th. So don't give up hope yet, Phillies fans out there.
Yeah, I see that 2-0 score already. Only the end of the second, as you said. It's going to be an interesting series with the Mets. I was really surprised the other night when I was doing some wild card figurings, seeing the remaining teams and who they play against, and was really surprised to see the Phillies had this 7-game series against the Mets. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's something that they're ending it all, in the division. They get the 3 with the Marlins to break up the 2 sets with the Phillies, and they've got to stay focused, the Mets. They have to go out and just try to win and not think about what the Giants or the Cardinals are doing. Just take care of your own business, and that's beating the Phillies. And as you say, the Phillies have the same purpose in mind. They want to get the best record that they can get and go into next year on a high, if you will, having a playoff record. So that's why sometimes when people say, the Mets have the easiest schedule, technically they do. But sometimes a team like that can be very, very dangerous at the end of the season because they have nothing to lose. They have no pressure. They're playing loosey-goosey, and they can really do you in.
Yeah, and I looked at the probably the toughest schedule of any one semi in the race for the wild card would have to be the Pirates. I believe they play the Nationals, the Cubs, and the Cardinals as their last 9 games of the season. So they probably have the toughest road. But as the Mets found out in the last 3 games, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tough team. It might be one of those teams that are out to prove something. They have some young players on the team. They're out to show what they've got, so to speak, and maybe that'll come up to success for the team.
And, you know, Rich, with the sweep by Atlanta, we're having nightmares here of 2007 and 2008 and the collapses there where the Phillies waltzed in and took care of business and won the division at that point in time. But we're going to have to see how it plays out as we go through. And as you say, it's going to be an interesting 10 days and 7 days with the Phillies, 4 here and 3 in Philadelphia to conclude the season. Hopefully they take 3 out of 4 here. I know you don't want to hear that, but hopefully, this is what we think they have to do. They have to take 3 out of 4 at home. I think at this point in the season, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, that would be a big success for the Mets to be able to do that. And we'll see what happens in the series. But you've been besieged by injuries. Your starting pitching has all but crumbled. It's just amazing that you're still in contention for this wild card with all the injuries that the Mets have had.
Well, it certainly is, Rich. And we got another one today with Steven Matz. We're talking about him starting tomorrow. And now he's got shoulder soreness. So I'm of the school, just shut him down. Why, you are where you are, and you've gotten there now with some of these young guys, 3 of the young guys, Gesellman and Lugo, and Yanoa pitched a pretty good game the other day. He'll probably pitch tomorrow night, Gabriel Yanoa. So why risk this kid? Just shut him down. Lugo's going tonight. He's pitching another decent game. He's been very good, Seth Lugo. Came out of nowhere. Wasn't considered a high prospect. Now, Gesellman, there had been some talk about, Gesellman, excuse me. They changed the pronunciation between the minors and the majors, I guess. He's been pitching pretty well, too. He's run into some trouble in the 6th inning lately, so maybe they've got to figure that out and get him out of there a little earlier right now. But, it's going to be interesting down the stretch. At least they've come through and kept this team in the pennant race or in the wild card chase, as you said.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting getting back to Ryan Howard to see which team will take a chance with him. Of course, he probably won't be commanding the mega buck salary that he's already earning with the Phillies, the $25 million a year deal. But I think he's going to land somewhere. It'll be interesting to see where he hangs his hat and plays for next season as well.
I think if it's anywhere, Rich, I think it's going to be in the American League, as a designated hitter. Something that he can really handle better. He won't have to play the field as much, and it'll probably what has he got, like 18 homers this year?
I think he's got a little bit more than that. And he hasn't played all that many games. That's the interesting part about that. He's got, let me check here real quick here. I believe he's got at least 20 home runs on the season. Of course, Michael Franco is leading the team with 22 home runs already this year. But he's sort of picked up the mantle where Ryan Howard left off. But, of course, like I was saying, Ryan Howard hasn't played a full season, and yet he's still doing quite well for the team. So not a total loss there has been Ryan Howard so far this year for the Phils. Has he been worth $25 million? I guess a lot of people would say no. But I think he's been fairly decent for the team in the time that he's played. Let's see. Of course, Howard is 36 years of age, so Yeah, I think the front-running team, to get back to your statement of where he'll end up, I think you have to consider the Boston Red Sox as a dark horse to pick him up. Ruben Amaro, of course, used to be the GM of the Phillies. Actually took a first base coaching job, Boston Red Sox. I'm sure a lot of Mets fans already know that. Mm-hmm. So he's got a friend up in Boston, so wouldn't be surprised to see him end up there.
Interesting. And with the retirement of Big Papi, he could fit right in.
Yeah, I'm checking his stats now. He's got 22 home runs and 51 RBIs in 104 games. So it sounds like he's been in a lot of games, but some of those games have not been starters.
Yeah, a lot of it was probably pinch hitting and whatnot.
Yeah, so seeing a very much reduced Ryan Howard get some respectable numbers this year.
Now, Velasquez, the pitcher that was so good in the first half, is he on? We're not seeing him in this series. I don't see him on the probable list. Is he still pitching, and did they shut him down? Or he did have a little problem with his forearm, I think it was, earlier in the year. What's the deal with him? Or are we just missing him?
Yeah, I believe he is shut down for the year. A lot of the Phillies pitching has been shut down for the year. Nola has been shut down for the year. He was one of those guys that the Phillies relied on very heavily. Of course, Vincent Velasquez as well. He's been one of the better pitchers for the Phils this year. Maybe even the best pitcher, if you want to look at it that way. He's got a lot of wins for the team. But, the Phillies are making do with what they have. You see Adam Morgan leading off the series tonight for the Phillies, and he has had a very rough year for the Phils. And it'll be interesting to see if they keep him next year. Tomorrow night, as you said, you have Gabriel Ynoa going up. He'll be going up against Jeremy Hellickson, who has been a very bright spot for the Phillies. Hellickson, they put him out on waivers. Somebody had claimed him. The Phillies brought him back. So I think the Phillies are going to sign him in the offseason for probably 2 seasons. He's still fairly young. I think he's like 29 years of age. And then Saturday night, Syndergaard will be facing Alec Asher. And he's a pitcher for the Phillies that had some good starts, and then he's had some terrible starts. So it'll be interesting to see which Alec Asher we see on Saturday night there at Citi Field. And let's round out the starters here for this Citibank appearance for the Phils. As you said, Gesellman's been good for the Mets, really good. He'll be going up against a young pitcher for the Phils who have been very surprising, Jake Thompson. So some of the big names you've heard about on the Phillies staff are already done for the season. But these guys, Asher, Thompson, and of course Hellickson, have been carrying the load for the past few weeks for the Phils, and maybe they still will against New York.
And, as all Mets fans know, that if we haven't seen these guys before, and I don't know if we have or not, but those new guys always seem to give the Mets a problem. So this could end up being a disaster. It could go very well. We'll have to see. Still 2-0 Mets in the third inning, bottom of the third, 1 out. So it's going to be a crazy 10 days, I think. And Rich, we've got the Baseball Talk radio show, and we'll have stuff to talk about because it's going to be a crazy race and could have one of those final weekends again where, who knows who's going to be in top or who's going to be in the wild card, and that's the way it looks like it's heading.
Yeah, maybe one of those one-game playoffs for either a National League team or an American League team. I think there's more teams in the running for the American League wild cards than the National League. So, it's, as you said, it's going to be a very interesting final 10 days of the season here. It's going to keep a lot of baseball fans glued to the televisions and watching the scoreboards.
And I don't know if you checked the scenario. again, I checked it because of the National League, let's just say I looked at it. I haven't figured it out. If the three teams end up tied, it is something that makes absolutely no sense to me. Why they would almost have like a round-robin tournament between the three. They have tiebreakers in place. Use the tiebreakers. They're going to seed three teams, and then one plays two, and three gets a bye. I know it just made no sense to me at all. So let's just hope the Mets can go out and win it. Sorry, at the expense of the Phillies, but just to avoid the need for a large computer just to figure out who plays who and where they play could be even crazier. So, and as long as the Cardinals lose, I'm happy. So, hopefully the Cubs will beat them up when they play each other. Maybe the Pirates will help out, and then we can move on to sanity with the Giants and the Mets playing in the wild card. Hopefully the Mets finish. Well, that would be nice because the Mets have the tiebreaker against the Giants. So we got to get those Cardinals eliminated somehow, Met fans. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting race to the finish here. And as you said, you never know. We'll see how the Phillies can do. I hate to see them stand in the way of the Mets, but that might be just what happens.
It could be. And Rich, go ahead, plug whatever you want to plug.
Of course, I'd like to let everybody know to stop by the blog at fightinphillies.com. That's FIGHTIN, Phillies.com, all one word. We go all off-season covering the Phillies. So if you're Mets fans out there, you want to see what the Phillies are up to, stop on by. And, of course, Phillies Talk Podcast. You can find that at baseballtalkradio.com, along with Gary's Mets Musings, the Baseball Talk Radio show, which we started recently, an extension of another show we used to do, talking all about baseball, and about 32 other shows on that network. So I'd like to see you around there as well.
And as always, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Gary. You have a great one, and good luck to the Mets.
All right, and we'll be back after this.